Ideas in STEM Ed is a production of the Idea Engineering Student Center at UC San Diego, which works to promote community, success, and inclusion at all levels. My name is Darren Lapomi, Professor of Nanoengineering and Chemical Engineering and Faculty Director of the Idea Center. The purpose of this podcast is to provide a forum for the discussion of innovative and inclusive approaches to teaching and mentoring, and to support the personal and academic flourishing and success of students in science and engineering. To learn more about the Idea Center, visit jacobschool.ucsd.edu/idea. My guest today is Jennifer Swanson. Jennifer is an author of science books for children, as well as a public speaker and podcaster. She got her undergraduate degree in chemistry from the U.S. Naval Academy and has a master's degree in K-8 science education. She's the author of over 40 books, including Save the Crash Test Dummies and Outdoor School: Rocks, Fossils, and Shells, which won the Kirkus Best Nature Book in 2021. In addition to her writing career, Jennifer is also a middle school science instructor for the Johns Hopkins University's Center for Talented Youth, and also co-hosts a weekly podcast, Solve It for Kids. She's also involved in a million other initiatives that would take me a full hour to list. Jennifer, thanks for coming on Ideas in STEM Ed.
Thanks for having me, Darren. I'm excited to be here.
So San Diego and UC San Diego have a strong association with the Navy, given that we have one of the largest naval bases in the world in San Diego, and many of our students are veterans. So they might be curious, why did you go to the Naval Academy?
Oh, that's kind of a funny story. So my brother is about 18 months older than me, and he went first. And so we went out to visit him during Plebe Parents Weekend. So after his, what we called plebes, freshman year is your indoctrination. And I was 16 and I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. My parents are like, you're going. And I stepped one foot on the academy grounds and I instantly fell in love. And I was like, this is the school I'm supposed to be. This is the place I'm supposed to be. And so about a year and a half later, that's where I was. I went there, and it was an amazing education. I was in the 10th class. I had women, so that was rather intriguing. But I got such an awesome education. And then I did 5 years on active duty, and then I got out because my husband was in the Navy, and it was just too difficult to have a two Navy family. There's lots of people that do it, and yay for you, but we were just not ready to do that by that time we had a son. So but yeah, it was a great experience. I would do it again, except maybe plebe year. I don't know about that.
Where did you serve?
So interestingly enough, I desperately wanted to be a doctor, but at the time that I chose my major, I did not realize that chemistry was the second most difficult major at the Naval Academy, because everybody at the Naval Academy takes 3 years of engineering. So I basically was like 4 hours away from being a chemical engineer. So I actually went up to the Naval Academy Prep School and taught chemistry for 18 months to try and, take the MCAT. And that didn't work because organic chemistry and I are not friends at all. So then I went to the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet, Atlantic Fleet, and I worked in the command center there, and we created the morning readiness reports of the whole Navy, or I should say of the Atlantic Fleet, to the 4-star admiral. And I did that for 3 years.
So you say that you were 4 credit hours away from a BS degree in chemical engineering.
Like that, yeah.
So what kinds of coursework do you take on the engineering side at the Naval Academy?
Okay, I took a full year of electrical engineering. We took thermodynamics. We took, let's see. Oh my gosh, this is a long time ago. We take all 3 semesters of calculus, a semesters of differential equations. So all of those kind of things, on top of all of the chemistry labs and all the requirements for, So the fewest hours I ever had was 17. It was crazy.
This fascinates me because as the Associate Dean for Students, I'm sort of ultimately responsible for overseeing big curricular changes, or at least they all kind of pass through my desk. And we feel like we have a lot of constraints at a place like UC San Diego, but at the
Right.
Naval Academy, it seems like, they can sort of make the students do whatever they
Well,
want
that
in
was, I
terms
mean,
of.
no, it has changed. To be fair, I graduated over 30 years ago and it's changed. But yes, back then you literally walked up, they handed you your curriculum, your schedule for the semester, and they were like, bye. And you didn't get to drop classes really and all that kind of stuff. It was very different, but like I said, it was an amazing education. I learned so much life skills too, which I think a lot of the veterans would probably agree. You learn so many life skills when you are in the military as well.
Like what? How does military training affect or inform the way that you do science writing and podcasting?
So I have a story that I tell. So I think when you're a plebe, a freshman at the Naval Academy, you learn there are five responses. There are yes, sir, no, sir, aye, aye, sir, I'll find out, sir, and no excuse, sir. Okay. There's no I don't know. There's no I can't do this. Right. And it's kind of funny, but I feel like those five like responses have kind of guided my whole life. So when I've been faced with writing topics about books that are really difficult to tackle, I figure it out. Like, interestingly enough, I wrote a book on electrical engineering, the class I got a D in at the Naval Academy. But I figured it out and it did very well. And it got very great reviews. So, there you go.
When did you know you wanted to be an author?
Oh my gosh. I started writing books when I was 5. But back then it was just, and I love to read. I mean, I live in a very small town. So I used to, back then, ride my bike by myself when I was 7, 8, and 9 with my brothers to the library. And I always dreamed one day of pulling a book off the shelf and having it have my name on it, right? But when you're a kid trying to translate that into an adult, you have all these different things. So it really kind of came to fruition after I had my own kids. And then I was like, I think I'm gonna write now. Not that I had time because I had 3 kids, but that's kind of when I started writing.
Is there any advice that you would give somebody who might be interested in following your career path?
Don't I always My favorite quote is never, never, never give up, right? Winston Churchill's. If this is what you want to do, it's not an easy path. I don't know that any career is. But you have to have a really thick skin here because you're writing your heart on a piece of paper and then you're handing it to someone and then you're saying, buy this. It's awesome. And they're like, nah, I don't think so. So, it's hard, but read widely and get involved with like a writers group or something like that. So you have other people that you can talk to about stuff and have them read it and, help you figure out what to write about.
How um, how do ideas come to you? Are you walking down the street and you see like a kind of creature and you're like, I'm going to write about that? Or do publishers come to you, or does your agent maybe suggest something? I heard that this would be a good topic for now. Like, this is timely.
Usually the first two. So I write nonfiction books, which are, of course, all true. So kind of the way that path works is you can either come up with your own ideas and write it and then send a proposal, or you can have publishers come to you. And I've done both. I'm very good at starting to write series, helping create series for publishers. Of some of the books that you can see behind me, like Brain Games, for example, National Geographic Kids had that. Well, National Geographic had a huge TV show called Brain Games, and they wanted to turn it into a kid's book, and they came to me and asked me to do it. So I have done stuff like that. My Rocks, Fossils, and Shells book, I helped create that series with a couple of other authors. But then I'm curious. My list of ideas is longer than time that I have to write. Now I'm really kind of more STEMmy. Like I love engineering topics. For example, mine Save the Crash Test Dummies. It's a history of car safety engineering, but kind of told through the lens of a crash test dummies, a day in the life of a crash test dummy. Who wouldn't want to be a crash test dummy? I mean, safely, right?
So when you see car safety reviews on carandriver.com or something, or like a 5-star crash test JD Power or whatever, what do you know about that the average person doesn't?
Oh, well, not, I mean, I know how a car is made, right? I know the structure and I know what the bumpers are supposed to actually give in now. Like they used to be give and take, kind of like it was physics, right? They rebounded. Now they're supposed to crumple. They have a crumple zone. So I know a lot more about it than the average person, but not as nearly as much as the engineers that
How about
provide.
from the standpoint of the crash test dummy and what they had to endure?
Yes, I've watched lots and lots of crash test dummy videos. They're, as a person, they're funny. As a crash test dummy, oh my gosh. And then what kills me is how expensive they are to create. And, because they have all these systems and everything in them, and then they just crash them kind of over and over or until they fall apart.
I think
Um,
the part that most people wouldn't appreciate is just how heavy they are because they look like dolls, like life-size
right,
dolls, but they're
exactly.
like 150 pounds, 200 pounds.
Yes, exactly. And the cool thing now is now they have different sizes that they can use, which makes sense. And I love talking about kids like that because I ask them why are there different sizes? And then we get to talk about forces and motion and how they hit you in different areas and all that kind of stuff.
It's funny you mentioned about
Mhm.
crumple zones, and ways of dissipating energy in a crash to redirect it away from the passengers. I think energy dissipation is something that we don't do a good job teaching to
Yes.
students in sciences, but then it becomes so important in engineering. And even at the undergraduate level, you don't really talk about dissipation of mechanical energy. The reason that sticky tape works is not because it forms a van der Waals bond with a surface, which it does, but that's only responsible for a small fraction of the
Right.
adhesive strength. Really, it's because all of that work is going into stretching and dissipating in those chemical
As it's
like
pulled.
bond rotations. Yeah, as you
Yep.
pull and stretch. And the same thing with with friction. The reason you don't take a step and then circumnavigate the entire world just because you're slipping is because all of that energy from the footfall has been dissipated into the
Yep.
atoms in the ground. So
Exactly. And if you can talk like that and to kids and make it something that they understand, they're so smart. They get it. I think sometimes us adults are falling behind some of them. They really understand it if you can put it into their language, and that's what I try to do.
did you have particular books that influenced you in your career, or particular authors?
Uh, let's see. I mean, that's tough because when I was a kid, a lot of the nonfiction books were like textbooks. They were kind of boring. I did come across, I don't know if I have it. I came across a book. It was funny. Last year I was visiting my daughter in Maine, and we were one of those old timey like bookstores where everybody just puts, sells back stuff. And I found this old nature book that I used to use in my science club, which I started in my garage when I was 7. And it was funny because you pull it off the shelf, and all of a sudden I was like, back in my garage, when I was 7 and thumbing through this. And it was funny because reading it now, I was like, dear gosh, this is like reading an encyclopedia. But that's what we had. And that was enough to engage my curiosity and get me to go outside and explore. So I don't know that I can name a whole lot of them. I think one of the biggest influences I had was, well, my parents supported me. I have 3 brothers. I'm the only girl, and I was never told I couldn't do science. And I didn't realize how amazing that was until I got older. And some of my friends were like, "You're studying science? Your parents are okay with that?" I was like, "Yeah, right." And then my 7th grade science teacher was a woman, and that was unusual for our small town back then. And she was fantastic. Mrs. Susan Roth. I still remember her name. And she had a full skeleton in her room. I thought that was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my entire life. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be a doctor for so long, because of her. Yeah, right?
Uh-huh.
Teachers are awesome. They're just fantastic.
Absolutely. I owe my career basically to a high school chemistry teacher.
There you go.
Did you did, in your current the portfolio that is your creative life now, if you had to draw a pie chart and say how much of your time is put towards sort of more traditional teaching at the Center for Talented Youth and authoring and speaking, how would you describe that?
So this is
That
assuming my bosses aren't listening, right? So CTY Online is awesome, and I've been teaching there, oh my gosh, almost 14 years. It's virtual, so it's more of a facilitation type of
oh,
thing. So
even
I don't,
pre-pandemic.
yes, yeah, oh yes, exactly. I've been doing this. We were virtual a long time ago. We suddenly got very popular during the pandemic. It's a fabulous course, and I love doing that. But it's really only kind of a part-time job. The vast majority of my time is taken up writing books. Um, I I write my own projects, and then I get called from publishers to write for them. I do speaking. I run a couple of blogs for STEM for my STEM platform, and then most recently, in the last couple of years, I started a STEM literacy nonprofit. So I have a,
What's the name of that?
it's called Kid Literacy. And what we're trying to do is kind of approach literacy from kind of a STEAM point of view and talk about critical thinking and problem solving, which I think are some skills that are kind of lacking in what we're teaching these days. And so we have a three-pronged approach of imagine, explore, read. So we're trying to get that off the ground. We got our nonprofit status during the pandemic, so it's been a little slow.
Wonderful. Well, not wonderful that it's slow, but
No, it's
wonderful
fine.
that it's launched.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think schools get right and wrong at the K through 8 level in their teaching of science?
Well, first of all, I will say that it's tough for teachers, especially with the curriculum that they have to do. It's very strict, and it's getting more strict with what they can do. So, unfortunately, sometimes they have to kind of shoehorn in science and social studies, math, and reading and language and writing take up a large part of it. So I think they do what they can, and some are better at it because they're more comfortable with science. And I think if you're not comfortable with it, you might be a little more afraid to teach it. Like you and I have no problem saying, I don't know the answer to that. Go look it up. Or if it's a kid, let's go look it up together, right? But I think some teachers that are maybe a little more hesitant feel like they have to know all of the answers. That's so
Hmm.
true. Part of science, a lot of science is research,
Oh
right?
yeah,
you
yeah.
you turn it back on the kids and you say, how about you go look that up and see what you come up with. So I'd love to see more of that. I'd love to see more of STEM across the curriculum. Like it doesn't have to just be in science, right? There's science books, and you could do literacy. There's lots of math and science. So I'd love to see that. But again, it's at the time constraint of what teachers are given these days, which is not
Yeah. I think a misconception about science is that, you mentioned science should be everywhere. And I think there's a misconception that it's some arcane thing that you need to know a particular jargon. It's like you're summoning lost souls with incantations that no one else understands.
easy.
And really, though, science is just the application of everyday rational behavior. Like if you buy a new toaster
Yep.
and you hit toast and the bread is too dark, you went too far, and I have a hypothesis that if it's a little bit less, it'll be,
Yes.
and what makes science, I think, is access to exceptionally large data sets
Yep.
sometimes,
Hmm.
tools that allow you to augment your senses, like microscopes,
Yes.
like spectrometers, radio labeling, stuff like that.
Exactly.
But really, we're talking about positive and negative charges interacting. We're talking about gravity
Yep.
and things that are familiar to to most people. It just we embed it in such impenetrable language.
Yes, and there's an opportunity to teach it all the time. So one of the talks that I do, especially with the smaller kids, is called Science All Around You. And we start out by pointing out things in the room that are science. And they get so excited. And they're like, light bulb, chair. I said, what about the floor? Of course they're like leaves, trees. I said, okay, well, let's talk engineering, the materials that made this. And I did that for one class one time. I think they were like first graders. And I was at the school for a little bit longer. And then I saw the first grader. I was staying in the hallway waiting for another class to go in and talk to them. And then all the first graders came back in from PE. One little first grader comes up to me and goes, Mrs. Swanson, I learned about science and smell. Everyone stinks after PE. I was like, yes, that is science too. Very good. Right? But I think that's it, is you just have to get kids or people of all ages, because I say that too, to notice it's all around you. It's not this thing, like you said, that sits on the shelf that we pull off and talk about. It's there all the time.
How do you choose your illustrators?
Well, the good thing is I don't have to. My publishers usually do that. So, let's see. I did like 6 or 7 books with National Geographic Kids. They, of course, have amazing photographers, so they handle all the photos. For the Save the Crash Test Dummies book, I did like photo research to find some old timey photos to put in there, and then the publisher found the illustrator, who is amazing. Her name is Tamika Grooms, and interestingly enough, her day job is as a civil engineer.
Wow.
Right? Isn't that
that's
awesome?
that's
I
really neat.
loved that they found her. So it's really kind of up to the publisher what they're going to do as far as the illustrator. All I can do is like, little tiny sketches, which would not never make it into a book.
So if our audience goes to Solve It for Kids, the podcast, they will find that you are an exceptionally energetic interviewer.
Thanks.
And I would like to know if you ever have any challenges keeping your level of energy up, not just for the podcast, but also for the huge number of things that you do. Are you ever afraid that you might someday? Where's my motivation?
Yeah, be overcommitted. Yes, about
Yeah.
every day. I look at my list. And I think that's something we all struggle with, right? Um, it's just there's so many different things that give me energy. And the podcast, I started that during the pandemic when pretty much all of my writing jobs dried up. The publishing world was being, crazy, kind of like everybody else, and it just got a bit nuts. And so I really did that because to me, my big platform, if I'm going to talk about my platform, is critical thinking and problem solving. I think that's the basis of. I mean, we like you were just saying, you go and you choose things, or you decide about your toast, right? Like you overthink
Hmm.
it. So thought about how I have been lucky enough to speak to some amazingly awesome scientists and engineers over the years and interview them for my books. And they're every single one of them that talks about their stuff is so excited, so excited. And I thought, I need to be able to share this with kids. Kids need to hear, like, you think of scientists, like they might think of you, okay, you just walk around your lab coat and you teach and whatever. but you're very excited about what you do. And I think that kids will be too. The other thing was, I had so many parents ask me, I'm not really a science person, and my kid loves science. I have no idea how to help them. So I also started the podcast for them.
Mm-hmm. How do kids learn about your podcast?
So yeah, that's the key, right? How to get your word out about your podcast. So we have been picked up by Kinzu Messenger, which is a kids and family platform. It's really cool. They came to me and they wanted to add our podcast to their list of paths that they offer for kids. So we get downloaded there. We actually have a lot of adults that listen to our podcast too. And then I have a fairly wide
Yeah.
teacher network, and we kind of push it out that way too.
Where else are you going to learn about toilet paper engineering? I
Right.
mean,
Was
literally,
that not the coolest episode?
that was an
Because now
exceptionally
when
cool episode.
you know, are you picking soft or are you picking strong toilet paper? Right? Very important.
I do happen to have a friend who's a toilet paper engineer, but I think he makes paper towels too. But I knew like 1% of what was in there, but
But did she not make it sound fun?
she
Right?
did, yeah,
That's what I mean.
absolutely.
I mean, I don't know if you've listened to the How Are You Like a Dung Beetle? Oh my gosh. That one was amazing. And then of course, you know, we've had a black hole scientist on there where you can hear a black hole. That that was mind-blowing to me. I had no idea you could listen to a black hole.
Do you
Um,
know? Yeah, seriously, no.
right?
So my daughter, who's 3.5, likes to watch videos on iPad and phones because survival, right? And
For you and her, yes.
for me and her.
Yes.
But it's hard to imagine. I know, it's not targeted toward 3.5, but the audio medium, is it? What do you imagine that kids are doing while they're listening? I listen to podcasts a lot, but I'm often driving or brushing
Right.
my teeth.
So we thought long and hard about this. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to video myself all the time. Um, but when I wanted them to imagine themselves, and when you listen and you imagine yourself, you can be that person, regardless of what their background is, right? You can imagine yourself regardless of race, of age, of sex, of back ethnicity. You can imagine yourself as that, and that's kind of what I wanted the kids to do. And we've with now that we're kind of licensing Solve It for Kids and bringing it as a part of kid literacy, we're creating teacher packs for teachers to use in the classroom. And the first thing we have them do is imagine themselves as an astronaut or an aquanaut or an engineer who works on self-driving cars, and we've done kind of studies because we're gathering stuff to hopefully get a grant, right? You know how that works.
Hmm.
And it's shown that it's made a difference, before and after. After they imagine themselves and they listen, afterwards they're like, I could see myself doing this. So yes, I know in the video driven world, we've kind of gone back and forth, but I really want this to be an audio podcast. So we'll
Yeah.
see.
I find that, so I released this podcast on YouTube as well as podcast formats. And what I find is that the YouTube audience is greater in terms of number of clicks, but it is a less committed audience. And the audience retention for the same episode by the end of the podcast is maybe 25% in the video, and it's more
Oh,
like 70% for the podcast. So the audio audience is smaller but more committed. Part of it, I think, is the types of activities that people tend to do while listening to audio. And part of it is certainly the self cannibalization of YouTube by YouTube itself, where you have the suggested videos on the side, and it's easy to just say, okay, well, I'm 1% less interested in this than when I clicked on it, so I'm going to find something else,
But this
and
looks better
then
over
all
here.
all my problems will be solved.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is that. But I didn't think about that, about them doing different things while they're listening. So, yeah, that could be it. I mean, it's when you're a podcaster, you have no idea when people listen to you or who's listening to you. That's like, it's very difficult to understand demographics and all that kind of thing, at least at this level. So you just hope that people listen and are having fun. At the end of our podcast, we always have a challenge for the kids, which I always say kids of all ages, because adults can do these too. Especially the toilet paper one. Go to get two different kinds and, do the test. Which one's softer versus stronger?
See, I
Um,
like that too because that's tactile materials, which is my research interest, and how different materials properties give rise to tactile objects in consciousness.
yes, exactly. Well, and science is best in action, right? Isn't it always much more fun to be in the lab? Assuming you know what you're doing.
If I were ever elected to the National Academy of Engineering, I would want my tagline to be Darren Lapomi, inducted for introduction of human perception as a tool in materials research, the use
Ooh.
of human subjects as instruments in materials research. Because it's true, the eyeball spectrometer, as long as you know the epigenetics and the categorization that your brain is doing, it's like, okay, a rainbow is a
Right.
continuously variable spectrum, but and those colored bands are the result of processing in the brain, the fact that we
Yep.
only have red, green, and blue dyes in our cone cells. But once you kind of know how your brain works, you can totally use it as a fluorimeter or or an
Why
absorbance
not? I mean, people do it
spectrometer.
all the time anyway, and
Yeah.
they don't even realize it, right?
Right. So at the end of my class on polymer science, I have the students take a piece of a plastic bag from the student union, a takeout restaurant at the
Right.
student union, and I have them recreate the stress strain curve just by pulling on it. I don't give them any information other than the weight of mass of your forearm is like 1 to 2 kilograms,
Uh-huh.
and here's a ruler, and
Yes.
calculate the stress, the strain, and given a cross section of about 10 to the 14 atoms per square centimeter, estimate the stress on all the bonds. and
Yes.
and
But that's
all you
critical
need is like
thinking, problem solving.
human,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean that's what makes it fun, right? Is when they have to discover it themselves, and they can get to do hands-on things. One time I went into my daughter's fourth grade class. She comes home and she's like, I hate science. I was like, oh gosh, that's like the worst thing you
Oh,
hear,
I failed.
right? And it was because she had a brand new teacher, and this teacher was amazing, but she would stand in front of the class and read the textbook because she was so insecure. And they were doing plate tectonics. And I said, let me come in. And so I Googled, and I made, you can get like jumbo marshmallows, right? The big marshmallows. And I dipped them all in chocolate. So it was a harden, right? Took them in, and I was like, we are going to learn about divergent and convergent, plates. And you push up, and the chocolate cracks, and it goes apart, and you see the marshmallow come through, and I'm like, that's divergent. Now you pull it down, it kind of goes back together, that's convergent. All those, you should have seen all those kids. They were just like, oh, I got it, right? um that's now I know every teacher doesn't have the ability or the time to do all of that, but stuff like that is fun, and
Mhm.
seeing it, like you're saying, tactile, holding it, and they could do it back and forth, and then they got to eat it, so they were like, we're having chocolate covered marshmallows today.
Yeah, another one of the senses that you can use as as a scientific instrument.
Right,
It,
why
and
not?
in fact, the Nobel Prize, one of the three chemistry Nobel Prize winners, Barry Sharpless, who had also won the Nobel Prize about 20 years ago for asymmetric hydroxylation chemistry used to see like natural products with a bunch of OH groups on them, and he thought, oh, that must taste sweet because it looks like a sugar. And he's tasting it. And the postdoc at the time, who's now a famous chemistry professor at Harvard, said, Barry, you sure, Dr. Sharpless, you sure you want to do that? And he's like, never mind. Give that to me. Anyway.
Yes, yes, we don't always eat things, of course. So put a disclaimer on that. But on the other hand, all those kids did very well on that quiz.
Mm-hmm. Do you have particular goals in terms of impact and reach, or the more the merrier? Doing,
I mean,
you're at a steady state.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to have great impact, like everybody else. And I think the part that you struggle with is how, and then the type of impact that you want to have. There are tons of amazing STEM and STEAM authors, and I'm just one of them. I tend to write, like I said, the more techie stuff, and so I hope that my impact reaches further, and that's kind of why I do so many different things. And it's not just for me. I'm trying to get the word out about science and STEM and how exciting it is for everybody. And it's not for everybody, right? But to me, the thinking principles that we were talking about, it's kind of like the basics of everything. And so, yeah, I'd like to do that. I think my books are getting out there. And then I was lucky enough to, when they had the World Science Festival in New York City, I presented there several times. One time at night in the Brooklyn Bridge Park for like 1,000 people. I spoke at the Library of Congress, the National Book Festival, and you'll like this. So everybody else it's like the Oscars for children, for authors. And everybody else, there's these big names, authors and illustrators, and they're drawing and talking their stories. I got up and asked 1,000 people to play Do You Have What It Takes to Be a Human Crash Test Dummy? All these people are like, what? At the end, they all had fun. Let me just tell you. They were all raising their hand. They were all like, yeah, I'll try that. I mean, it was pretty fun.
That's awesome.
It was, right? I was like, you're all doing science. Shh, don't, and engineering.
So as we were talking, my sister, who is a young adult author and librarian in the Rochester, New York area, texted me to tell me that you have a ton of books in the Brighton Memorial Library and the Rochester, the Monroe County
Awesome.
Library System, and to send her the link when we're done recording.
Well, thank you. That's always wonderful to hear. I hope kids are, if I can inspire just even one kid, one child, to pursue STEM, I'm thrilled beyond belief. My job is done. And you probably feel the same way, right, with your students?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The last question I wanted to ask was about libraries and the future of libraries and how they can play a role in science education.
Oh, wow. Yes, libraries need to stay. Like I said, I grew up as a kid going to the library. I mean, during the summer, like almost every day. And they're a great place because you walk into the nonfiction area and you're looking for, I don't know, rocks. And there's like 15 books or 30, there's all of these books. And each one of them can give you a little bit of a different information or an angle, and there's space, there's astronauts, and I would just sit on the floor cross-legged as a kid, and I would just pull books off. I mean, the librarians loved me. On the other hand, they had to do a lot of reshelving after I left. And they still do, but I think libraries are a great place. Plus they also have activities, so they'll have author events, like I've gone to present at libraries. They'll do robotics, they do STEM events. They do a bunch of different things. So yes, libraries are fabulous places and resources for kids of all ages.
I just asked her if she wanted me to ask you something because I'm online with you right now, and she said, I can't think under pressure! Exclamation point. We should say, ooh, I can't think under pressure.
No, that's totally
the tone.
fine. I'm thrilled that my books are in her library. That's fantastic.
And shout out to my mom, also a librarian of 30 years, recently retired.
Yay, thank you. Thank you.
All right, Jennifer, this was absolutely a pleasure. I think I would normally ask where the audience can find you, but we've gone over several venues. So is there anything else that you wish we had talked about or covered that we hadn't?
I think that's good. You can check me out on my website where everything is. It's jenniferswansonbooks.com. And that'll take you to all the different places. But thank you so much, Darren. This has been wonderful. And we will see you soon on
Oh, yes, we're going to turn the tables.
That's right. We will see you soon on our podcast.
All right. Sounds awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for listening to Ideas in STEM Ed, a production of the Idea Engineering Student Center in the Jacobs School of Engineering at UC San Diego. This episode was edited and engineered by Sky Lee, with theme music written and performed by John Viviani. Title art was created by Caitlin Wong. Special thanks to Sarah Eckert for guest booking and marketing. The Idea Center works to promote community, success, and inclusion at all levels. To reach us for guest suggestions and other feedback, please send an email to ideadirector@eng.ucsd.edu. And to learn more about our programs, visit jacobschool.ucsd.edu/idea. As a final note, the views expressed by me or the guests do not necessarily reflect those of the Idea Center, the Jacobs School of Engineering, or UC San Diego. See you next time.